But I can tell you the times that I eat emotionally the most are when my kids are doing something, because you just want to make sure they're safe and they're protected and they're going to be successful and they're not going to go through all the things that you went.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I am just scarfing down all the things, right? And the weight is just packing on. So, a twofold question for you is, why does our parenting feel so stressful at
Mhm.
times when it's also a joyful giving thing that we love, and how much of that is stemming from um, our childhood?
That's another massive question. I can't say I wasn't
You're
prepared though.
doing massive work.
I appreciate you. So there's two parts to it. One is, remember when your brother bullied you and your brother shamed you?
He would say some of the meanest things. Like he was a terrorizer.
I'm going to go all the way back there because here's the truth. And I want to give credit to somebody else who said this before I said it. His name was Maston Kip. He's another very, very good holistic practitioner, works through the body and the mind. And he said, a hurt person hurts a person. Most people didn't catch on to that because we want to say victimize and be like, no, they hurt me because they're assholes. Oops, sorry, I'm sorry.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
when you dig deep into it, it's the same like saying, oh no, an addict is an addict because they're like messed up. But you look deeper into it, and a person will only act in a way that's probably negative or difficult or shaming when they're going through something themselves. Because by human nature, we're not predisposed to automatically attack someone unless we feel attacked or feel like we're weak enough that we need to offend somebody else to protect ourselves. It's actual
Mm-hmm.
human evolutionary science. And so, in the same principle, when your brother did what he did, it's because he was probably going through a really insecure time in his life about something. Maybe it was about his own body image, maybe it was about being accepted, maybe it was about anything, but he found it easier to blame you and shame you rather than look into his own problems. So now fast forward to parenthood. When you become a parent, right? If you are hurting from things you haven't worked on that you've carried for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years of your life, you will unconsciously, remember this word is massive to use, unconsciously, you will unconsciously project these onto your children. Now, what that looks like in some cases is physically beating. And I have to be careful for what I say because I think my parents are watching all the way across in India, which is like 12 hours away. So I need to make sure when I go back home in December that I still have a room to stay in for Christmas. So I really got to be careful what I'm saying. But, but a lot of us have been exposed to different versions of conditioning. This is what we call conditioning in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Conditioning when you're growing up that, hey, if you don't come to church with me, I'm not going to give you dinner like tonight, for example. It can be really subtle also where when you bring home an A from school, immediately the A goes on the fridge. But when you bring home a C from school, daddy just suddenly ignores you. And that C just goes and it's laying on the table under the dust. What does a child think when they see that? They're like, okay, only if I have this, why am I loved? If I don't have this, I'm not loved. So a child now starts to absorb so much of an identity of themselves, of I'm valuable in these circumstances, I'm not valuable in these circumstances, but more than anything, the child starts to think only when things are going my way am I feeling loved, right? As we just talked about. So, for example, only if things are going in the way where daddy wants me to, like, go to church with him or do XYZ with them, or like, mommy wants me to have these good grades or like, dress a certain way. What that teaches a child is that control also equals love. So now, as this child starts to grow up into being an adult, they're still hurting from these massive wounds that are deep in the subconscious because your wounds, your mind may do an amazing job of making you forget things by memory suppression, repression, but your body will never forget. There's books like The Body Keeps the Score, any of those. So actually, trauma and conditioning are stitched into the nervous system, which is why sometimes you'll get a random text from someone about a certain thing and that person's never texted you before. That thing may not be seen as bad as it was or is, but you immediately react. Or if you like had a breakup with someone, you get a text from your ex, immediately you react. He maybe just be saying, "Hey, do you have my wallet?" or "Hey, do you have this thing I left behind?" But you immediately react because your nervous system is so stitched into getting used to trauma of abandonment, rejection, or any of those things that comes with it. Now, when you give this person another being to now take care of, it is natural. It's not a shameful thing that like parents will project onto their kids. It's a natural thing that when a parent has a child, that if they have not worked through their wounds, they'll push it onto their kids. For me personally, in my life, it came from my mom having so much emotional stress of dealing with 5 kids and lots of travel, and like my cousins also were brought in because their parents passed away. I was the youngest, and when I was born, she was so emotionally fatigued, right? And so by that point in time, my mother became more of a provider mother than a nurturer mother. So she was there for me all the time when like anything was needed, like grades. I hurt myself, which I did all the time. But when I needed like 10 TLC or like tender love and care and stuff, I felt like it was lacking. And not only that, I had a dysregulated nervous system as a child. So I was like so agitated and hyperactive. It frustrated her further. She was so emotionally fatigued. She was going through her own shit. So how did she take it out on me? By trying to control me. And the only way I could be controlled, and this is what I've accepted as a child, was by some sort of physical containment. And that ended up being like some form of like physical punishment or like physical like beating or whatever. And that's also because conditional societally, that stuff is also accepted where she came from, which was in India or whatever else. So my point is, when you're a parent and you have a child, it can be extremely stressful. And here's actually why: it's not because of your child, it's because your child is constantly reminding you of the shit that's within you that you haven't worked on. Now, if you
Mm,
don't work on that stuff, you're going to keep projecting onto your child. So you'll try and control them. So a lot of fathers who had no sense of emotional expression, when they have a little girl or a little boy come to them and run and hug them, they'll feel awkward to hug their child. They'll feel awkward to say, I love you. Like so many of us have never had like, I love you said to us by like a father or a particular parent figure. But it's not because the child doesn't deserve love. It's because the parent is incapable of and hasn't done the work to do the healing for it.
Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.